Selectors with another two-part combo list here. We are going to be talking about some new ones. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into it and start talking about some two-card combos. We already gone over these ones. Now we're on some more. Okay, the first one is Energizing and Vanishing, right? So if you are a deck that energizes significantly, like it just has a fair amount of Energize, then you might want to consider running some green Energize or Energize removal, which is Osagetsune. I know that this is sort of like common practice to anyone who's already been around in Wixoss for a while, but Parajulius and Osagetsune has fallen off the map a little bit recently. They're very, very strong cards still. Osagetsune is one of the only cards that, for example, can go toe-to-toe with Exia and Remember and some of these other crazy Signies and still have pretty good effects with it. So it's worth mentioning that this is still a thing to do if you have significant amount of Energize, often being in your Elrig deck, which is why these are all Elrig choices. Consider Parajulius, consider Osagetsune still. They can still be very good late game cards for you. They usually aren't good enough on their own. You need to add something else to them, but they're falling off the map a little bit. I'm just reminding you guys that this is a two-card combo that exists and is pretty good. The next one is Freeze. So Freeze is something that I think a lot of people really, really, really like, and they want to be just like good in general, but it's difficult to make Freeze its own tribal deck. However, that's not to say that there aren't Freeze packages that are good. Now, I'm cheating a little bit here, and I'm throwing a sneak peek in here. You'll see Remember is in here. Remember is from set 10 and has a very strong ability, which is that when it attacks, you can down and freeze something. This will allow you to potentially trigger some stuff and get some uses out of it. It doesn't always work in the way that timing wise that you want it to, but I just still am going to point out that Freeze is still a very good package that you can do. Out of the Freeze package, generally speaking, I think these are the three best things that you can do. You've got Neon Tetra, which is the ability to just freeze anything in general, while being more of an enabler than it is a payoff. I think Bradamante and Royal Blue are your best payoffs. They haven't aged super well, but if you are in a control deck that wants to discard the opponent and also limit the amount of resources that they can do, Bradamante is still a very strong way to do it. Basically, it's like a gay ball get home, let's say. Royal Blue, on the other hand, is actually still very strong. It opens up lanes with a lot, which is something a lot of the Freeze kinds of builds, control kind of builds, and Freeze lends itself to control, struggles with. So anytime that you can get an open lane, you should just take it. And it's also got a very strong life burst ability, being able to freeze a Signy and freeze an Elrig. Okay, moving right along, we've got the Terra Beast combo. I think this one is a pretty popular one too, so a lot of people have heard of it. But you can either shortcut it with having just like 3 Thoroughbred in your deck and 2 Tanguzara, or 3 Thoroughbred in your deck, 2 Tanguzara, and maybe 1 Buffalo. All of these basically do the same effect, which is they kind of screw over the opponent while being aggro. So, for example, Thoroughbred pumps everything. Buffalo also does a great job at pumping a lot of things. Thoroughbred specifically lets you draw extra cards too, and these are good against basically the same deck, right? If you are seeing a Machina against the side of the field, you also probably see a Madoka against the side of the field. This is a black Vanish 12 or less and a tap down something, and also probably plays some amount of discard. Thoroughbred helps to really fight against discard. Tanguzara really helps to fight against tap down effects and also Machinas. Buffalo helps you open up lanes. All three of these cards work incredibly well together to basically put, even from the trash, by the way, and this is one of the few rare red trash recursion options you have, aka good filtering or good game stuff, good stabilizing stuff. And all of these do a really great effect of just being genuinely hard for the opponent to deal with their assist Elrigs, specifically blue assist Elrigs and black assist Elrigs, and helps you get in more damage than you would normally. Moving right along, we've got Madoka as my substitute here, but it can really be any sort of Elrig effect that allows you to draw a card and discard a card. I have come to this conclusion that I never want to play the payoff cards that you see on the other side of the other side of this slide, without a Elrig deck constant ability of being able to draw a card and discard a card. There was a time where I played a lot of draw cards, discard cards in my main deck, but playing those just to enable these payoffs is not quite strong enough. However, Madoka skirts that just by giving you the effect, and while it seems insignificant, once you add it to ZR's ability, and now you're making the opponent you're able to open up a lane 8,000 or less on attack with a enter all the time is amazing. Notre Dame and Firefly Squid, which basically force the opponent to lose extra cards with that effect, are fantastic as well. So it's worth mentioning that these cards are really, really good, but you need a good enabler that doesn't detract from anything else in your deck. And Madoka's got the tightest package to make these 3 cards specifically work and hate on your opponents. Again, being that Firefly Squid and Notre Dame basically give extra discard to the opponent. ZR gets lane opening to the opponent with the Madoka effect here of drawing a card, discarding a card. Here we've got another one. This is a very basic one. This was utilized a lot in mono white, but is still pretty good elsewhere. But mono white is still probably its home. It's got the Ange level 2 and White Heaven. These are basically the same thing. You get to trash a Signy the opponent controls while doing another effect. Totorosa has the once per turn effect of whenever a Signy on your opponent's field is put into the trash, you can enter charge 1. It basically rebates both of these from being 3 enter and 2 enter, which is pretty expensive, to 2 enter and 1 enter, which is reasonable. So this ends up being a pretty good wombo combo if you've got the room in your white aggro deck for this type of effect. I would bring Totoroso back in the future if I could, if we find there are more trashing Signy effects from the field. For example, we know Gaebolg is a really good card to go with this. However, I like the idea of rebating it and then being able to use this enter immediately. Although Gaebolg is also another good choice that you could use to get Totoroso off the ground. Just not commonly used. All right, so we've got Hijikata and Senga Aerial. Senga Aerial here is could be, I think there's a Madoka that also does a give target level 2 or less Signy on your field Lancer. This is a combo from like way back in the day. Actually kind of won the first ceremony was this Hijikata. If you vanish something, right, and you also have made the opponent discard 2 or more cards this turn, then the thing is if you vanish, or if you've discarded 2 or more cards this turn, which is pretty easy to do with blue, then you can basically say when this vanishes a Signy, it makes the opponent discard a card at random. That's pretty rare to do that at a level 2 and actually quite powerful. So giving it Lancer on top of that is a really great choice because anything that vanishes something and then does an effect, you want to give Lancer to. This could go a little further into the Awakened Signy as well, although I'm not a huge fan of the current Awakened Signy that exists, but there's a lot of Awakened Signy as well that say when this vanishes something through battle, you get it awakened, and then you can give it Lancer to do something else. Another combo here that's less commonly used, but I've used in the past, is Fennec, Phantom, Terra Beast, and Buffalo. So the way that this works is it's got kind of this interesting ability, which is that Buffalo, you play Buffalo, then you play Fennec. Buffalo then gets the power boost to get itself and turn itself into a 16k, and then Fennec, when it attacks, or let's see, at the beginning of each attack phase, at the beginning of each attack phase, its base power becomes the Signy's total power. So you copy Buffalo's 16k, however, you still retain the plus 4,000 that Buffalo gave it, which means it's a 20k. So when you attack with it, not only do you enter charge 1, you also get Buffalo's ability, which is that at the beginning of your attack phase, all Signy with power 20,000 or more gain the following ability that you can pay 2 and vanish anything on the opponent's field 12k or less. So it ends up becoming a little bit of a wombo combo together that they definitely meant for this to be played together. And you can buff up your Fennec to being huge while simultaneously getting Buffalo's effect added to it. Another effect that you can do, and this is a more common one for people who know and play Ancient Surprise, is Morai has the ability to, when it enters, it gains the color of a Signy, of an Elrig you control. So basically, this is on demand, just on the field 2-color Signy, which is flexible enough that it can be whatever you want it to be. So plus Worlds Reverse, this is really good. You enter it, you choose a color, then Worlds Reverse, you let Worlds Reverse trigger happen after you resolve the entering ability. This means that you can pick any color you want for Ancient Surprise, and it becomes very, very strong. There's some other things that you could do. Senga, for example, likes this. There's some other cards out there that want to see that you have 3 or more colors on the field, and Mirai is basically the glue that holds those decks together. So anytime you're looking at stuff that's like rainbowy, think about adding maybe Mirai to the deck. It does a really good job and being this sort of reflection Signy. Moving right along, we've got Summer Lives Blues and Ray on the Wings of Radiance. So Ray has the ability to, if you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, target blue Signy you control can gain Assassin until end of turn. You've got to discard a bunch of cards to do it. Summer Life Blues basically gives you a methodology of doing that. For 2 enter, you draw 2 cards, and that gives you 2 of the 3 cards that you can discard to gain Assassin. Not to mention, I don't know, if you do it on the turn that you have Ray, then you end up with all of the cards you need to do it, and you only have to spend 1 enter because you technically gain an enter from Ray's ability, its enter ability. So this is a strong sort of choice that you can do with the Summer Lives Blues. Summer Lives Blues is just a good card on its own, but if you wanted to get access to Assassin in blue, which is pretty rare, this is one way you can go ahead and do that. The next thing is Steampunk. So, Steampunk is commonly used in DXM decks, being that more or less it has the abilities when it comes to souls, right? Whenever a card underneath your L-Rig moves, you can pay a colorless. If you do, target Signy on your opponent's field gains negative 8,000 power till end of turn. This is most relevant with souls because you can slow roll your souls and still get out double lane openings with Steampunk. It's a very, very good card in that role. However, some people do not realize that it also has other options that you can do here. So for example, Exceed is a big one. When you Exceed, you are able to use Steampunk. So, and because you're able to bring it back from your trash just by using your downing your 2 up to level 2 L-Rigs, which also, by the way, works well with Exceed because you're probably trying to Exceed away your assist stuff, then Steampunk can come back, then you use your Exceed, and you can get these effects off. It's actually more stable than people recognize, and there's also ways to enable it in the L-Rig deck, like I see shown here. And I think it's probably worth a look at in some of these black decks that people aren't necessarily looking at. I think it's actually quite strong. I've even seen it used to some effect to even do final end of turn stuff. So for example, Tama or Bang, I've seen use it. So when they have on attack triggers, take a card from under your Signy and put it into the L-Rig trash. I've seen Steampunk, while it's not great because it doesn't open a lane for you to deal damage with, I've seen people use it in more control decks late game to basically be an buy it at home Gaylog. Let's talk about Yuki. So Yuki has a plethora of effects. Yuki's just a really strong card on its own. I very rarely have a white deck now that does not have, or have a splash of white that does not have 2 or 3 Yukis in it. In fact, there are several decks that I've splashed white in specifically for only Yuki. That's how powerful of a card I think it is. But it has extra utility in Aya. Aya has a once per game action ability where you can turn target Signy face down. And then if that Signy can flip over if the opponent discards 2 cards or pay 2 enter. However, if you take Yuki and you put a Signy on top of that card, inevitably it means they can't really flip over. I mean, they can, it's just really bad for them if they do. And you also then can stack it with other on-attack trigger effects, so that way you can make sure that you say, do you want to flip over this Signy? They're going to say no because there's a Signy on top of it. And then you go, cool, I vanish it, and then still get in my damage or whatever I need to do. It ends up being really good for Yuki, and I think it's a great wombo combo that you should know together, especially if you're running Aya. The last one we're going to talk about today is Tama and Picture Frame. So Picture Frame, basically Tama says you down to Signy, and then you can attack a second time paying some enter. Picture Frame, however, says that when an Elrig on your field attacks, you can up a Signy on your field. Usually picture frame, but it can be other stuff as well. Well, this means that normally you can only get in 1 damage on the field and then down your 2 Signy to attack twice with your Tama. With picture frame, you're able to actually attack with 2 Signy on your field, get in 2 damage, and then attack with Tama up your picture frame, down 2 Signy, get in an extra 2 damage, meaning you can get 4 damage that turn with that type of effect. This is more used in mid-range Tama lists or aggro Tama lists, and I think it's actually very strong and opens up field or orients that you wouldn't normally be able to. And it's a pretty good one that you can use. Okay, so that's it for these 2 card combos. I hope they opened up some brainstorming for you for decks that you're building, or maybe even new tech that you haven't considered for old decks.